welcome Gabby to the Value Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah. So, my name is Gabby Pagaro. I just got married a few months ago.
So
Yay.
exciting.
I'm 25 years old. I grew up in Alpine, Utah. I live in Provo now. And yeah, I kind of do a branch of trauma therapy called NLP. And I also do a kids camp for kids who have lost an immediate family member every summer called Camp Koa. And that's me.
Awesome. We love it. We're so excited to have you on. When we first started this podcast, you were one of the first people that came into my mind.
Really?
I was like, I need to have Gabby on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you always have so many wise things to say.
Sometimes I talk too much, so stop me.
No, you're great. That's why we want you on, right? Share your wisdom with us, right? So I've known you for a few years now, and every time I meet you, I feel like you are learning something new. You're diving into a new interest. You're just a woman of many talents. That being said, I feel like a lot of the things that you do are very driven by your life experiences. So I guess I'll open it up to you. How would you say your life experiences have informed the work that you have done and the interests that you've been involved with?
That's a good question. So, I would say, okay, this is so a random backstory, but the other day I was like listening to this, it was a podcast, and this girl was quoting the movie Thor, and it kind of like really stuck with me. There's a part where Thor is talking to his mom, and he's basically like, "Mom, I failed." And his mom says, I don't even know if it's his mom, actually, someone. He's talking to someone, and the person says back to him is like, says that where you failed is your purpose. It's like your medicine to give. And so with that being said, I feel like the life experiences I've had have actually been the struggles and the pain and the parts of me where I felt like I was failing have actually been the parts of me where like the light and the medicine has come through. So I feel like where I'm at in my life with doing a kids grief camp with one of my good friends because my mom passed away, and I could understand what it's like to lose your mom and losing her with cancer, and being able to connect with these kids has been like where I've been able to show up in my medicine, even though it's been my struggle. As well as with trauma therapy, having like a childhood that had some experiences that were traumatic, and for such a long time I felt like I was a failure, and I lived as like a victim, or like my identity was formed around that trauma.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when it comes to like how have my life experiences set me up to where I'm at, it's 100% because I failed at those things. I feel like sometimes people think it's like, oh, I've always been good at this, or this is something like I've always wanted to do. For me, like trauma therapy was because I'd been through trauma. Like it was simply that, like my dedication to studying about how our brain processes trauma, how our body holds trauma, is simply because for so long I was sick. I like had mental illnesses, major anxiety, depression, all of these things that I labeled as myself as being a failure were actually the parts of me that was like, oh, this is actually what I'm going to do in life and teach people, is because I went through it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. As you were talking, I kept thinking about, like, you kept alluding to almost this moment of shifting between like seeing yourself or your circumstances as a failure, and then using those as a launch pad for healing, for progress, for growth, whatever you want to call it. Was that was that turning point like a certain moment for you, or was it a process, or how did that happen for you?
I would definitely see it as like a process. I would say though, like the significant moment for me when things shifted was when my brother-in-law passed away. So there was like a good chunk of 2 years where I literally was like, oh, okay, like my life sucks. Like life just sucks. Like everyone goes through that. And I feel like when you're in it, so if I don't know. You just think it's never going to end. And you're like, this is the new normal. Life's just going to suck.
This is just how it is.
Yeah. So it was like back in, oh my gosh, what year? 20?
It's 2022.
If it's 2022. Okay, 2017 is
Yeah.
when my mom passed away. I couldn't even remember. And she passed away from cancer. And after she passed away, man, it was just like I felt like a part of me genuinely died
Yeah.
at the time. And a year and a half after that, my brother-in-law took his life. And after that happened, for me, it was like a point of like, what is happening? Like, life did not even seem real. And I for sure at that moment saw myself as an absolute victim.
Just out of control.
Yeah, I totally saw myself as a victim to God, to life, to everything. But it's not funny, but it's interesting how some things like happen so other things can come through. And it's just like a horrible example, but like I can now look back and see that my mom passing away in the weirdest way was like one of the biggest blessings to me. Not because like I obviously miss my mom, she's my mother, but there was a story that I was carrying about my childhood for 21 years, and I didn't feel like I could share that story or tell that truth while my mom was alive. And to be fair, like that's probably not true. I'm sure I could have, but I'm just trying to find the like good side,
course,
you know,
and
her passing. And I was able to tell this story of I did experience some abuse growing up from someone close to me. And there was a few times growing up that I tried to express that to certain individuals and I was shut down for it. And so I think I carried this huge fear that if I shared my story, like how would that affect my mom?
Yeah.
And like, would my mom have to carry that label and would people judge my mom? And I was so afraid of how my story would affect other people that I didn't feel like I could tell my story. But after my mom passed away and my brother-in-law passed away, it was like I felt like, okay, like I gotta tell my story. Like I gotta come clean. Like this is my truth. This is what happened. And as I did that is when I kind of felt that shift of kind of stepping out of the victim role and seeing myself as a victim and seeing myself as like, what is my purpose? Like, what did I come here to share? And for me, it's like been the way I've been able to discover my medicine. And I feel like my medicine is, you know, helping people step out of that victim role. For so long, I thought it was like, oh, I want to, you know, fight. I want to have such a loud voice when it comes to abuse, and I want to fight back. And I did that. I did fight back, and it was the most exhausting thing in the world for me. And I finally had this moment where I was in Fiji, and I had been fighting back against this individual who I, you know, was hurt by growing up. And it was exhausting. And this person is an attorney. And so legally, it just felt like impossible.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Fiji and just being like, okay, God, like, this is awful. Like, I am trying so hard, you know, and I really wanted to be like an example and a role model to women everywhere that like, it's not okay. Like, abuse is not okay in any shape or form, in any way, it's not okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like, I want to be that voice. Like, if I can stand up, then maybe it can motivate other people. And in that moment, I just remember this overwhelming feeling of like, forgive him. And I was like, no, no, God, I'll do
Sorry,
anything
out of
else.
the
I'm not going to
question.
forgive him. Who should I call? The police? Which police should I call? Like, I'll call anyone. Just I'm
Send him
not
straight to jail.
Yeah, like, no, we're taking him to jail. And the feeling was like, forgive him. And that moment was like so eye-opening because it helped me understand like the truth of forgiveness. And it's funny because I promise you I came to this podcast wanting to talk about something else, and now it's like, nope, you're going to talk about forgiveness. So for me, that was a transitional moment in my life where I had, you know, growing up in religion, I was always told that forgiveness meant turning the other cheek.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was really cool where it was like, that's not what forgiveness means at all. And the phrase that came to me was take your power back. And to me, now I associate the word with forgiveness with like reclaiming your power, like reclaiming your truth. And so I did forgive him. I went to his house, and I remember I sat down with him face to face, and I looked him in the eyes and I said, I forgive you.
Wow.
Like, I forgive you. And that's it. And didn't necessarily get the response I was hoping for. But at the same time, it was like his response didn't affect me anymore.
Yeah.
It was like, that's his story. And like, it was like, I could stop carrying his story. And I'm someone who, like Danielle knows, like I love like being connected with the other side. And so it's been cool to like feel my mom on this journey with me from the other side.
Yeah.
In a sense that like I've felt her support. I've felt us grieve together. I don't know. It was a really cool moment for me when it was like a shift for me where it was like I no longer saw myself as the victim, but yeah, I empathized with myself and I forgave this person, and also was able to like forgive myself in a sense because I let this story define me as like, oh, you're unworthy. I'm not good enough. Like something's wrong with me
Yeah.
because of the abuse that I experienced. And so it was like a cool moment where I was like, no, I forgive me for carrying these untruths because they are untruths. And so I guess I see myself now as like my medicine in like helping women and children. It is, I mean, everyone, but I particularly like right now work with a lot of women and children, is like teaching them that reclaiming your power isn't always necessarily fighting back in the way that you think. And not saying that you can't, like by all means take whoever you want to jail, I don't care. But
yeah, that's on you, right?
yeah, I'm like, awesome. If it works for you, go
More power
for
to
it.
you.
Like
That's
more
great.
power. I love it. You know what I mean? I'm all about justice. But I feel like for me, finding part of my medicine was the beauty in forgiveness. And forgiveness has nothing to do with letting that, like, I don't have that person in my life. But I also, it was just like this title of victim, this title of survivor. It was so heavy for me.
Yeah.
And it was like, gosh, like, how can I shift this story and change this story that feels empowering to me? And again, I don't speak for anyone who has been abused. This is totally my story and the way that I've found healing. And I think that everyone should find healing in what empowers them.
Yeah.
But for me, particularly in this situation, it was through forgiveness. So
I really like how you talked about forgiving yourself for everything, because I feel like when we think of forgiveness, it's like, oh, I forgive other people for what they've done to me, but not necessarily like what I've done to myself in the ways that I think about things. And I think just as you were talking, I was thinking about like the amount of mental toughness that takes, because it's almost easier to claim the role of victim and just say, oh, like this is just how it is. I'm a victim, and it's easier to just like wallow in that maybe than to stand up for it. And I'm sure obviously you could speak to that more than a lot of people of like what that really feels like to acknowledge it, but then the mental toughness it takes to flip that and make your weakness become a strength. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that have some sort of trauma or mental illness or whatever it is, whatever makes them a victim, that they're stuck in that spot. What advice would you have to somebody that is stuck in that spot, even if it's not exactly like what you were stuck in, but just in the role of a victim? What advice do you have to them to get the mental toughness to bring themselves out of it and make that shift to forgive yourself and turn it into a strength?
Yeah, no. I guess like tapping into like the mental toughness that you were talking about, for me it's knowledge. Nothing has been more empowering to me than self-education. I was at UVU for years trying to be an English major, thinking, it was getting me somewhere. And finally I had this moment where I was like, girl, school's not for you.
It's
Like,
not your thing.
what are you doing? And it was super empowering because I learned so well by myself. Like, I'm telling you, I could read and study for 12 hours a day, studying what I want
Yeah.
versus studying what someone tells me to do. So, the first place I would say when you are coming from a place of being a victim, um, you gotta feel it. You gotta empathize with it. And there's this kind of stigma with like victim blaming. And I mean, without going too much into that, it's like there is a lot of shame when you're a victim. You feel so much shame. I mean, like, for me, th- I was really close to the person, and coming out and telling my loved ones who that person was and what happened, it was like so shameful. I
Yeah.
was so embarrassed. And it started when I was 2. Like, I was 2 years old, you know what I mean?
That you had
And
no choice in the matter. Not that you ever
yeah,
do
I
with
was a
abuse, but
little toddler,
yeah.
and I see little kids and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, I seriously remember being 3 years old and thinking something is seriously wrong with me,
Wow.
and I was, like, very little, and I carried that shame, and so I guess the first things first, when it comes to being a victim, guess what? You are a victim. There's something about having to own the victim before you can let go of the victim. And so, I would say, like, for me, the strength that it took to let that story go and heal that story
Mm.
was education. And, um, yeah, it was like self-study. The first book that I read was The Body Keeps Score, and,
That's a good one.
it's so
Yeah.
good, and it's like this is where, like, my obsession with the brain came in. I tell people I have, like, a crush on the brain. I love the brain. I'm
So
obsessed
cool.
with the brain. I think the brain's so cool, and, so reading that book, it was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not unique in my trauma," and I think that's so important for people to understand, like, you're not unique in your trauma. You might be unique in your story, but not in your trauma, because the brain reacts similarly, um, for everyone. We all have a brain. It all does the same thing when it's
Yeah.
in fight or flight. So, going and reading this book, The Body Keeps Score, I was able to connect with like, oh my gosh, my brain does that. Oh my gosh, I react that way. And I was like, oh, this is just what happens when you experience trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after I read that book, I was introduced to the Unique Foundation's Haven Retreat. It seriously was life changing.
Mm.
Like, that place deserves everyone's money because, like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And what they do is they basically take survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and uh, anyone who's over the age of 18, you get to go there for free. And you go there
Wow.
for 4 days and you freaking live in a mansion. Let me tell you, it is
Amazing.
nice. You are pampered. It is like the safest space I've ever been in.
Wow.
And so, my recommendation, if anyone is listening to this who is a survivor of sexual abuse, especially or childhood sexual abuse, reach out to the Unique
We'll
Foundation.
put the link in our bio.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
please do. They'll take you and you go for 4 days, and it is like the safest environment ever. You're surrounded by trained professionals and it's all women.
Wow.
So it's completely run
Just
by
so
women.
safe.
There is not a single guy, not like love you guys, but like
Right.
there are no guys there, and it's just all women.
Yeah.
And you just get to be surrounded by other women who have gone through something similar. And what's so cool about the Unique Foundation is they educate you. So for 4 days, you are just in classes, and you get to learn about how sexual abuse affected your relationship with food, how it affects your relationship with sleep, how it affects your relationship with your body. I would say there's like majority of women who have experienced childhood sexual abuse have an eating disorder.
Interesting.
And so they teach you why. Like, why does their brains respond that way? Why does the body hold trauma? Like our
Yeah.
tissues, our muscles, our cells hold emotions. So a lot of times that can look like being underweight or overweight. No matter what you're eating, you could have the healthiest diet and be exercising every day and you could still be overweight because you're holding that trauma.
Mm.
So that was amazing for me, was like reading that book, and then going to the Unique Foundation retreat. And after that, I was like, it's game over. I'm going to change the world. Like,
this is it.
I am going to empower everyone I can with this knowledge. I just like became so grateful for that place. And like my
Wow.
dream is to one day like go back and like work with them somehow because I love that organization so much. But so the mental toughness, it was just totally from educating myself, and like knowledge is totally power in the sense of healing from trauma. And so after that, I just got really into understanding the brain, the mind, spirit, body connection, which has led me to where I'm at now with becoming an NLP practitioner. And NLP is just, it stands for neuro linguistic programming, and it's understanding the language of the subconscious mind. And so through kind of understanding my body and like reconnecting with my body, because having experienced a physical abuse, you dissociate, you disconnect from your body. Your body feels bad.
It's
it
not
feels
safe, right?
unworthy.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel safe. And so being able to reconnect with your body and like reform a connection and relationship and understand the language of your body, because your body speaks a language to you every day.
Yeah.
We just aren't really taught. And so yeah, I guess that was really, really empowering to me.
I love that. As you've been talking, I just can't help but think about how many people who are listening, how many people in the world in general have experienced some form of trauma that either don't recognize it or maybe aren't willing to do the steps that it takes to be healed, right? Because it's a lot of work to heal from trauma. It's not an easy task. It's not a short process either. I mean, it can be, but it can be easy, right? Like we've talked about.
Yeah.
But I guess my question would be, maybe as motivation for people listening to really do the work to dig in to heal, what are some powerful things that have shown up in your life since you have started your process of healing?
Let me think about this. So I would say the most important thing that I have learned is that healing looks different for everyone. And when you've experienced trauma, you have experienced what it's like to feel unsafe. So let's say you jump back into this healing world, you're going to therapy, and you're in an environment that doesn't feel safe, or with someone that doesn't feel safe, but you're told, no, you have to do this to heal. Like, no. Your brain isn't going to do any sort of healing unless it feels safe. And also I've come to learn is that there's like, I have a love-hate relationship with the healing world and all things like woke culture, I guess, because it's sometimes it's like re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
And the first thing is you need to establish safety. And I've learned that like some people aren't ready, and that's okay. And we shouldn't be forcing each other to be ready. I have a client right now that I'm working with where they're really being pushed to accept certain things. And as I've been working with them, it's like the most important thing of healing from trauma is reclaiming your power, because at some point you feel like that experience or that trauma took something from you, or like you gave your power away to that experience. And so I would say like in everyone's healing journey, the most important thing is to establish safety within yourself. And that could look like going on a walk outside. That could look like eating some like vegetables that day. I don't know. It's something nourishing. It could look like connecting with Mother Nature. I have a lot of clients that have experienced a lot of religious abuse, and on some level I can empathize with it. And so talking to God might not be something that's safe.
Yeah.
Based on their brain's associations with the word God, right? So going to therapy isn't just the end all be all. It's not go to a therapist. Like that might not be what someone needs. And so I feel like the most important thing in someone's healing journey is doing what works for you. I feel like in the last few years, I've come to really appreciate diversity and the idea that we're all so different. And the ego naturally feels safe in similarity, right?
Mhm.
So when someone believes or does something differently than us, that triggers a fear in us, because our ego likes similarity.
Mhm.
But I found that in the healing world, like sometimes it's like, do this diet, try this, do this therapy, as if that thing should work for everyone. No, like maybe it doesn't. And so this is a cool part when people are going through their healing journeys, like you get to reclaim your power, and you get to decide what works for you. And then when you find something that works for you, don't decide that that works for everyone now. Like I've learned that the hard way in some of my relationships where I thought, hey, I've done so much work and healing in this area. Now you should do
Your
it.
turn.
And they're like, no, I'm not ready. And
Yeah, or that doesn't work for
that
me.
doesn't work for me. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. So
I
Guess we're
forgot.
not the same person. Sorry.
yeah, so it's like I've learned that the most important part of the healing journey is establishing safety within yourself and reclaiming your power, and that means you decide. Like I love that. Like I decide what works for me. I decide what doesn't. You decide what works for you, and obviously there's like boundaries within that where it's like you don't get to decide and not affect someone, especially like physically.
Mm.
So I would say like stay in your lane in your healing journey. Stay in your lane, and own your lane, right? Like own your power, own your lane, but don't go crossing everyone else's lanes, deciding that what you experienced and how you view certain things now or your healing journey is now going to be what everyone else should
Yeah.
do. And I say that because I have not done that in the past. So I speak from experience of stay in your lane and own your lane.
But again, it's like we talked about at the beginning, right? Like these things that you've learned, you're now using
Right. Yeah.
to like better the world around you,
Mm-hmm.
which I think that in and of itself is a healing process.
Definitely, definitely. And it's like I think there's a desire that once you've stepped into the healing journey to kind of be like, "Oh, I'm healed now." No.
Right?
Like no, it's like it's a process. Like yeah, you can like I've looked back at my journey and it's like, yeah, like I healed those aspects, but there's been so many times where um I just wanted to be done.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I'm done. I never have to address that again. Like
Wouldn't
I've
that be
healed
nice?
all the layers of that. And then a trigger will come up and I'll be like,
Just kidding.
I don't want to do this. But it's like, no, it's okay. Like it's a journey. And I will say that it also can be easy. That's like my new thing I've been really playing with the last few months is the belief that it can be easy. So whenever something shows up like a trigger, um you have multiple opportunities and choices of how to respond to triggers, and I've decided that I lived my life for so long thinking that it had to be so hard, and so now I'm like, you know what, I want to play with this new idea of like, how does this get to be easy for me? And easy for me might not be easy for someone else, and easy might be hard first and then easy later.
Yeah.
But I would say like the healing journey doesn't have to be like this awful thing.
Yeah.
Like it can be easy and it can be fun and it can be love and it can be exciting and happy, and I guess like not projecting on the healing process as it has to look a certain way for it to be called healing. It's like whatever, you decide. Like
Don't put it in a box, right?
yeah, you can
Yeah.
choose. I don't know. So,
That's cool.
yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Super awesome. I had a question that totally left me. Oh, I remember. So it sounds like you are super, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like you've had to learn how to be really in tune with your mind and your body and your spirit as like a whole.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've tried to work on, but have not probably gone to the extent that you go through to really be in tune with yourself. What do you have to do on like a daily or a weekly basis to continue to stay in tune with yourself? Because I'll find myself like getting distracted or just going through the motions of my days,
Mhm.
and then a week or two will pass and I'll be like, how am I feeling? Like
Mm.
I'm not okay, and I
Yeah.
haven't like given myself the time to like address that. So how do you
It's a good
go
question.
about that?
So there's two things that come to mind. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is like the brain is so powerful, and the brain is your friend. And the brain's not going to make you remember things or bring things up that you're not ready for. So the first thing I would say is like, sometimes when it comes to the whole healing world, you think that you should be you have to go digging to find something to heal. Please don't do that. Don't dig. You don't have to dig. The brain is our friend, and the brain will naturally bring things up when we're ready.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, if you ever feel the pressure that you should be healing something or remembering things and you should be further along in your journey, it's not true. Because wherever you are at is actually exactly where you're supposed to be in your journey. And I don't even like the word journey. Like, I guess in your process of healing, I guess. So, for example, like when triggers come, let them come. And I tell my clients this, like, if they start crying in a session, cry. Please cry, because if you push that down, then you're going to have to go deal with it in a few days when it comes back up again. So, like, if something comes up, let it come up. Like, there are times now where I'll just be talking to my husband and tears are just coming down my face. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I just don't want to suppress this because then I have to deal with it in a few days.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to let it go.
We've
But
all been there.
yeah, it's like, just keep talking to me. I'm good. I'm just going to let the tears fall.
The husbands are like,
process.
what is wrong? How do I fix
Yeah,
you?
but it's like, I don't know. I don't want to deal with it. So later. So I'm like, it's coming up now.
We're gonna let it come.
If you're uncomfortable, then like,
Figure
why,
it out.
why are you uncomfortable? Why is that triggering something in you? But anyways, going back
That's a
to
Oh, there you go.
problem.
That's like reverse psychology. Like, no, friend, this one's on you.
no, just kidding. My husband's great with it. But I guess like the in tune part, I just love the phrase that the power that created the body heals the body. And so don't go digging. Don't go digging. Don't try and find something that you need to be healing or that you need to be working on. But I would say, like, in regards to like being in tune with yourself and wanting to connect with yourself, I would say, like, I guess, how do I want to word this? Is for me, I'll just speak for me personally. It's been a lot of working around belief systems. And so I tell Danielle this all the time, it's a layer thing.
Yeah.
And so, at the beginning I would say I'm in tune with myself more, but like, I know that as I continue to heal beliefs and clear things that I'll be more in tune. But I would say, like, start with where you're at and start with your triggers. Like, when your triggers come up, just get really curious. Like, my favorite thing to do now is ask myself questions, whereas before I didn't really feel like I was allowed to.
Yeah.
And I always let my emotions define me rather than like question them. Like, when I was crying or when I felt sad, that meant something about me. But now I'm like, oh, where is this coming from? Why am I crying? What in my external environment is happening right now? Is there a like, I'll just get really curious with myself. And I would say the in tune part is natural. Like, we're naturally all very, very intuitive. Like, the idea of like spiritual gifts or psychic gifts or all of that, it's like, well, we all have that. We just have layers and stuff, but like on top of us. So I would say, coming back to how to be in tune in yourself is like, just start by clearing whatever is naturally coming up for you. And as you do that, you will just naturally be more in tune because it's something that we are, not something that we have to go find.
That makes sense.
I like that, meeting you where you're at rather than like digging.
Yeah,
like you were
don't go
saying.
digging, just like,
Yeah.
and where you're at is exactly where you're supposed to be. That's the biggest thing, is like, we compare ourselves to each other and it's like, that's silly.
Yeah, or we compare ourselves to our past selves or our future
Yeah,
selves, like where we want to be
exactly.
or where we were, or where we think we should be, rather
Yeah.
than just like
And then
accepting.
realizing like the ego's silly. The ego just always has these expectations of who and where we should be. But knowing that those expectations derive from belief systems that are handed down from culture, from so many things, that it's like, hey, just let like the natural self come through, and your natural self will come through, and that will show up oftentimes in triggers. And I think sometimes in the world it's like, oh, I don't want to trigger you, and not saying that we should go around and just trigger each other, but
Shouldn't
like,
try and hurt people.
Yeah.
no, like, not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, in safe environments, like, if you're triggered, ask questions.
Be curious.
why is this triggering me? Because the more that you feel your feels and feel your triggers and work through them and breathe through them and sit in it, like my trainer always says, eat your broccoli and sit in it. Like you just sit in your emotions. Um, the more that you are becoming more of your natural self and your in tune self, because that's all there's left.
Yeah.
So
That's really beautiful. This is a little bit of a departure from what we've been talking about, but it does connect.
mhm.
This will probably be my last question, so we'll start kind of wrapping it up.
Okay.
But I've been talking with you quite a bit recently about the difference between masculine and feminine energy and
Mhm.
how that is operationalized in the world.
Mhm.
And so I would love to have you just speak to maybe those differences just a little bit, and maybe we'll bring it full circle to how you've seen um, that informs you running your businesses, or
Mhm.
tangible ways that you can see those different energies like in the real world.
Yeah.
If you could speak to that.
I'll start off by saying I'm no expert into like all respects of Asian philosophy and Eastern medicine. Like I really know nothing like in comparison to where the beauty of these modalities and truths come from. But I guess I can talk to like as what I've learned and what I am
That'd be
learning
great.
is I've created a business at 21 and it was so not fun. It was something that I love to do. I love doing humanitarian work, started a business, and in the sense of masculine energy. And again, it's super important to know that masculine and feminine has nothing to do with gender. It's actually literally just energy. Um, so there's always two ways to move with life, right? There is the masculine way, which is kind of what we see in Western society. And I don't like deciding that one's good and one's bad. Like, I mean, there's healthy ways of both and unhealthy ways of both. But for me, particularly starting this humanitarian company when I was 21, I did it in a very masculine way where it was force, working all the time, working 24/7, physically exhausting, where I had to make things happen. So like in masculine energy, in the masculine sense of how to get from point A to point B is you have to make it happen, right? Like you wake up at 6 a.m. and you get your workout and it's like this
Like hustle culture kind
hustle
of.
culture, right? And that works. Like
It works for
there
lots
are
of people.
very successful people who hustle and they're very successful and that is so awesome. That is not for me. And I learned that the very hard way is I tried to join in this hustle culture and I tried to just do that, like go the extra mile, yeah, it wasn't fun. It didn't end up in the way that I wanted it to go, simply because I was trying so hard to make it happen. And that's not organic and natural for me personally. And for some people that works and that's awesome. For me, I am now becoming more aware of like my natural design is to be more in the feminine.
Okay.
And for me, as I've come to understand the feminine, it's a lot about understanding quantum physics and the idea that like energy attracts like energy, right? That's not even quantum physics, that's just physics. And like energy attracts like energy. And so in what I'm trying to create in my life, it's like instead of me feeling like I have to do the hustle and go out and make something happen, it's more me sitting with myself and asking myself, how can I receive this? How can I be in like vibration of this thing I want to attract? And so how I would say this is like, okay, for example, right now, for me, if I want to be bringing in more clients, for example, what would it feel like? What would the version of me who had all those clients feel like? And how do I feel now? And that will help me know the gap of where I need to be. And so it's not a necessarily physical go out and doing. It's like an internal, emotional, what do I need to clear? What belief am I holding about myself that is preventing me from feeling this way? So like, for example, if me working with a lot of women or expanding some of my businesses is the version of me that feels abundant and worthy and good enough and safe. Do I feel abundant, worthy, and good enough and safe right now? If I don't, why?
Mm.
What beliefs do I need to go shift? What trauma am I still holding on to? What limiting stories am I still holding on to? What ancestral stories am I holding on to? So that's more of like the feminine way that I now engage in business
Mm-hmm.
is I imagine the version of me, like how does she feel having those things? And then I sit with how do I feel right now? Then that gap is what needs to be cleared. And as I clear and do that work, which is just me sitting at home and literally like being in meditation and clearing things, um, is how I bring in the life that I desire and the work that I desire. And so that's the feminine way. And the feminine way is a lot of stillness, intuitive, nurturing. And so both ways are great and both ways work. It's just you decide, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is it you decide which one you are, or you decide what your mix looks like?
I mean, yeah, for sure it can be a mix, and I feel like it's moment by moment. Like there might
Okay.
be times where I'm like, okay, yeah, I get to like show up and do a little more of the masculine side and actually get stuff done. And going back to the feminine one, it's like there's definitely a balance between like putting up a vision board and then being like, I attract it, I attract it. It's like, okay, no, like
You got to do some
yeah,
work
like
still.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's like it takes work too. It's not like I'm gonna sit like all day forever and then you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like there's a balance.
Okay, yeah.
But I would say like there's definitely doing the masculine and overdoing the feminine. And
It's all about
like,
balance,
it's all
right?
about balance,
Yeah.
right? And so I feel like that gets to be a step-by-step process, an intuitive process. So it's like, it looks different for me every day. Like sometimes I go through time periods where like a few months feels more feminine, where it's a lot of sitting and stillness and doing the inner work. And then I go through months where it's like, I am busy and I am out doing stuff, right? And it changes.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that is for everyone. And someone isn't just masculine or just feminine. Like we all have both. So it's just kind of getting in touch with like in the present moment, what feels right for me right now.
It's so interesting to me talking about just because, I mean, like you mentioned, like Western society is very masculine.
Mm-hmm.
But if I put on the lens of like hustle culture works, like this is how you get things done, like the feminine aspect of energy doesn't seem like it really does anything.
Yeah.
Which is like wild just because that's our filter, right? Our
It's our
lens through which we
filter.
see everything. But I know you've seen examples in your life where
Mhm.
doing the inner work and, you know, living with that more feminine energy actually does
Oh, it
produce
works.
real things in your life, real tangible things.
Yeah. That's literally how I got married. Is I used to joke and tell people, they're like, how are you ever gonna get married if you never date or you never leave your room? And I said, oh, he'll come into my room. And Eddie did indeed come into my room. You know, like he came over with one of my friends one day. But for example, the manifestation of the feminine for me in dating was completely feminine for me. Like at first it was very masculine and it was like this provo dating culture, like go out,
Yeah.
date, do this. And I got to a point where I'm like, I'm not doing this. And I realized like I was going out trying to make something happen when I wasn't in alignment with what I wanted.
Mm.
So the guys that I was attracting, I was like, oh, dating is so hard. Well, that's who I was in alignment with. And so I had to go and sit with myself and figure out what parts of me are not in alignment with the guy that I wanted to marry.
Hmm.
And so, you know, there's always this belief of like, gotta find the right person. And it's like,
You gotta be
you
the
could
right
find the
person.
right person and you can't have them because like you're not the
You're
right
not in a
person
place. Yeah.
for, you know, it's like Einstein, I'm going to mess up this quote, but one of his famous quotes is like, he's basically talking about how physics is becoming the vibration of the reality that you want. And
Mhm.
he's like, this isn't religion. This is physics. Like this is
how it
science.
actually works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like energy attracts like energy. So if you're hustling and grinding to get something and it just feels like it is not working, well, you're probably not in alignment with the thing that you want
Hmm.
or that you're trying to attract. Like my perspective of money has completely shifted into the feminine, where instead of going out and feeling like I have to work so hard to earn money, I've kind of shifted into, do I even feel like I could have this amount, like the certain amount of money I'm trying to bring in am I even in alignment with it? Like, what would I do with it? Like, lottery winners all the time, only 30% keep, like, are able to maintain the amount of
Yeah, I've
money
heard
that they
that most of
win
them blow it in like a week.
because they're not in alignment.
Yeah.
And you think about how, like, it's, again, it sounds so woo-woo, but it's science. And that's where I've loved being able to study the science side of the feminine is, for me, I would rather do the work internally to attract that I'm wanting.
Mhm.
And attracting doesn't mean sitting and staring at the car that you want. Like, it's like everything is emotional. So it doesn't really matter the car itself. How would you feel in the car? Would you feel worthy? Would you feel happy? Would you feel abundant? Would you feel joy?
Mhm.
And if you don't feel that right now, then that's exactly why you don't have the car. So it's like feelings are vibration, and how you feel is an indicator of where you are vibrationally. And so as you are wanting certain things to show up in your life, you got to figure out what version of yourself has those things. As in, how do they feel? How do you do that? Close your eyes and imagine it, Close your eyes and imagine yourself in the car. What does that feel like? What are those feelings? Identify them. And then how are you feeling now? What emotional blocks or beliefs are you carrying that are preventing you from feeling those feelings? Go and do the inner work until you start living at that emotion, that vibration, and that thing will come to you, yes or yes, because it is science. Like, truly, that is how I am married. Is because
So
for
crazy.
months I became the version of me that was married.
Yeah.
For months I was single, and the way that I was living, the way that I felt about myself was the version of me that got married.
That's so cool.
But you just have to wait for the physical to catch up, because
Yeah.
energy shows up and then the physical. So, there's two ways of doing it, and I think the goal is to do both. But yeah, I like the feminine way a lot. It's nice.
Sounds
obviously
pretty good to
works
me.
pretty
It's
well
still
for ya.
work. It's
Yeah.
still work, but it's work that is more fun for me. So
That's so cool.
That's awesome. I've definitely gained a lot of value out of this.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of things that were said that was like, oh, I don't know, made me like actually think about where I'm at and what I need to do to get to where I want to be. So hopefully there was that for people that are listening too. But I'll just say like my little takeaways, I guess, and then if you want to wrap up. But I really enjoyed the forgiveness aspect that you talked about in the very beginning, and just sitting in the discomfort and allowing that to shape where you're going. And I know I'm definitely going to do a better job at like sitting in the uncomfy feelings and in the bad feelings and the angry feelings and the whatever feelings, because I often tell myself like, oh, like just push those out because that's not where you want to be. And then I ignore them, and then they come out in this huge meltdown that I can't get over for days. And so like sitting in the uncomfortable feelings and letting that, like asking myself questions of why am I here, what's making me feel this way, and what can I do to become the version of me that doesn't feel this way. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say for me, this is something I learned either from talking to a friend or therapist. I can't remember. Both are great.
Yeah. Sometimes
But
friends are therapists.
I know, exactly. But we were talking about like the process of creation and how a lot of times like when you create something, maybe this was you I haven't talked to about. That's kind of funny if it was. But that fits, I guess. But in the process of creation, a lot of times you have to kind of break things down, or there has to be a period of destruction before you can rebuild. And not to sound like doom and gloom, but on the contrary, I think talking with you, this has been a very hopeful conversation of just recognizing how even in sometimes maybe the messiness of the healing process, or of your failures in life, or the hard things that we go through, there's all of these beautiful things that can be created from it. And as you learn about yourself and become curious about your triggers and the things that are hard for you, it will enable you to attract that life and that person that you want to become and that you want to have. And I think that's really hopeful. It's really beautiful. And that's something I definitely want to apply more to my life.
Well, thanks for having me,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks
it's
for
so
coming on. This has
fun.
been
I just
so
like
good.
This is
talking to
great.
you.
I know, I could do this all
Fun.
night.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's a wrap.